Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We are still on the Kitab al-Ashribah and on the chapter of honoring the guest. We took the hadith about the Ansari giving his guest precedence over his children, and the Prophet said, قَدْ عَجِبَ اللَّهُ مِنْ سُنِيعِكُمَا بِضَيْفِكُمَا اللَّيْلَةِ. Allah was pleasantly surprised at what you did with your guest last night. And we talked about what the ajab for Allah Jalla wa Ala means, but it is not the same as the ajab of humans. In another narration of the chapter, Abu Huraira says that the ayah in Surah Hashr was sent down because of this occasion. وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. They give preference to other people over their own selves, even though they were feeling hungry themselves. In another narration in the chapter, Al-Miqdad reports that I and two of my friends were so hungry that we lost our power of seeing and hearing. We presented ourselves as guests to other companions of the Prophet, but no one would take us in. So we came to the Prophet, and he took us to his residence, and there were 3 goats. The Prophet said, "Milk these for us." We milked it, and every person drank, and we set aside a share for the Prophet as well. It was the Prophet's habit to come during the night and greet the people in such a voice so as the one who is sleeping would not awaken. The Prophet then went to the masjid for the salah. Then after, he was to come back and drink his share of the milk. Al-Miqdad says that Shaitan came to me and whispered to me that the Prophet has gone to the Ansar who will give him to eat and drink, so why don't you drink his share of the milk? And he says, I did so, and then afterwards I regretted it. And the Shaitan exacerbated this sense of remorse. He said, "Destruction upon you, what have you done? You have drunk the share of the Prophet. He's going to make dua against you and you will be ruined." Al-Miqdad says that I placed a sheet over me. If I covered my head, my feet would be uncovered, and if I covered my feet, the head would be uncovered, and I could not sleep. But my 2 friends were sleeping, for they did not do what I had done. He says, then came the Prophet, and he greeted us as he would normally greet us. He uncovered the milk to drink from it, but did not find anything there. He raised his head towards the sky, and I thought he was going to invoke the curse on the one who took his drink, and I would be thus ruined. But rather the Prophet said, "O Allah, give food to the one who has given me to eat, and give to drink to the one who has given me to drink." Al-Miqdad says, I took hold of the knife and went to the goats, that I may slaughter one for the Prophet. I wanted to find the fattest amongst them, and all of them were milch goats, that is, they were used for milking, because they were giving off milk. He says, then I took hold of the vessel which belonged to the Prophet, and I milked the goat until it swelled up with foam. I came to the Prophet, and he asked me, "Have you taken your share of the milk during the night?" And I told him, "Drink it." And he drank the milk which I had bought for him. He handed over the vessel to me, and I said, "O Messenger of Allah, drink it." And he drank it, and handed over the vessel to me again. Then I perceived that the Prophet had been satiated, and I had got this blessing. I burst into laughter so much that I fell on the ground. And the Prophet said, "It must be one of your mischiefs, O Miqdad." I said, "O Messenger of Allah, the affair is like this and this, and I did such and such." The Prophet said, "This is only a mercy from Allah. Why did you not permit me to wake up your 2 friends, so they would also take the milk?" And I said, "By the one who has sent you with the truth, I do not mind whatever the other people receive from you, as long as I also receive it from you." So from this lengthy narration we find that the other companions did not entertain Al-Miqdad and his 2 friends, and this must be because they themselves did not have too much. We also find the good quality of the Prophet, that he would greet the people so as not to wake up anyone who was sleeping. Also the amazing character of the Prophet, when he saw that somebody has taken his share of the milk, he did not become angry and make dua against him. The average person may well just throw a fit of rage. Rather, the Prophet made a dua which you would not expect somebody in that situation to make. "O Allah, feed the one who feeds me, and give drink to the one who gives drink to me." So just look at a situation where you would expect somebody to become angry, how the Prophet keeps himself composed and calm and self-possessed, and uses only the best and noble language. We also learn that the Prophet would drink milk and give to others to drink as well. He would make a dua found in the Sunan of Abi Dawud, saying, "Allahumma barik lana fihi wa zidna min." Allah bless this for us and increase us in it. That is to say, the milk. we find that even the companions could be affected by these shayateen. They are humans, and they can too make mistakes.
And just appreciate the evil plotting and planning of shaitan in that he tempts you to commit the sin, and after you've done it, he then inspires you to feel despair of the mercy of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Therefore, we may advise, be aware of falling into temptation of committing sin, and then also be aware of falling into despair after you have committed sin.
In another narration in the chapter, from Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr, he says, we were 130 people with the Prophet, and he says, does any one of you possess food? There was a person who had a measure of flour, and it was kneaded. Then a tall mushrik with disheveled hair came along, driving his flock of sheep. The Prophet asked him, do you want to sell anything of it or give it as a gift? He says he will not give it as a gift, but he will sell it. And the Prophet bought from him a sheep. It was slaughtered and the meat was prepared, and the Prophet commanded that the liver be roasted. Abdurrahman says, no one among the 130 people was left who did not receive from the liver. If anyone was present, he would give it, and if anyone was absent, he would set it aside for him. And the Prophet filled 2 bowls, one with soup and the other one was with mutton, and we ate all of it to our heart's content. But still some was left over in those 2 bowls, and I put it on the camel. This narration is very similar to some narrations which have preceded about the blessing that the Prophet has put into the food. A seemingly small amount of food suffices hundreds of people.
Notice also how the mushrik did not give a sheep as a gift, rather he sold it. Had this been a companion, he would have given it as a gift, because his heart would have been soft to the Prophet. As for the mushrik, his heart was hardened, and he did not have as much mercy as a companion would have had. And this is the effect of Iman in your heart.
Also in the chapter, Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr reports that the people of As-Suffah were poor. Once the Prophet said to his companions, he who has food for 2 people should take with him 3 guests. The one who has food for 4 should take 5 or 6 guests. So Abu Bakr brought 3 people with him, and the Prophet brought 10. Abu Bakr had his evening meal with the Prophet, so he was not with his guests, and he stayed there until the night prayer was offered. He came to the house of the Prophet and stayed there until the Prophet became sleepy, and then Abu Bakr returned. His wife said to him, what held you back from visiting your guests? And Abu Bakr said, oh, did you not serve food to them? She said, yes, it was served, but they refused to eat until you came. Abdurrahman, the son of Abu Bakr, reporting the narration, said that I hid away. And Abu Bakr said to me, oh, you silly fellow. And he reprimanded me. And he said to the guests, eat, though it may not be pleasant now. Abdurrahman said, we did not take a morsel of food until the guests had eaten to their fill. And behold, the food was still more than what it was before, even after the guests had eaten. Abu Bakr said to his wife, what is this? His wife said, by the coolness of my eye, it is 3 times more than what it was before. Previously, the guest of Abu Bakr had said that I will not eat, and Abu Bakr says that vow was from shaitan, not to eat. Abu Bakr then took some food and ate from it. He carried the rest to the Prophet, and it was kept there till morning. During those days, there was a covenant between us and some other people, and the period of the covenant was over. We appointed 12 officials, and with each of those 12, Allah knows best how many people were with them. And we sent the food to them, and all of them ate from it. So this narration, again about honoring the guest, we take from it the closeness of Abu Bakr to the Prophet. He was always with him. We find in the narration that Abu Bakr became angry with his son Abdurrahman, and he called him, "Oh silly fellow," because his son did not urge the guests to eat. And the reason why the guests did not eat is because the host did not urge them to eat, or so Abu Bakr thought. Note how Abdurrahman says that he hid from his father, out of fear that his father will beat him. We find the guest taking an oath that he will not eat, but of course it is better to eat, and when you take an oath to do or not do something, and then you see a better option, then it is legislated to break your oath and offer the kafara. And we took that hadith before. And this applies to all situations where you see a better avenue, even for the waqf. If you see that the waqf can be made better use of, for example, to build a masjid in one place, let's say place A, this is the waqf given by the deceased. But you find that place B is better because it has more people. And there is no problem in you changing the waqf from place A to place B, even though this is not what was originally decided by the one giving the waqf. We find a hesitant point during this narration where Abu Bakr's wife says, La wa qurrati aini, lo, by the coolness of my eye, it is 3 times more than what it was. She is taking an oath by other than Allah Jalla wa Ala, because the coolness of your eyes is not Allah, nor is it one of the names or attributes of Allah. And we know that taking an oath by other than Allah is shirk. Well, either we can say that this was before the prohibition of taking an oath by other than Allah, or it could be the case that this is one of those words that flows from the tongue without you actually intending it. As in the Prophet's statement, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ وَأَبِيهِ إِن صَدَقَ, by my father, he has gained success if he speaks the truth. When the Prophet said that about the Arabi not increasing or decreasing beyond the 5 times prayer and the zakah and the siyam. Also, it needs to be noted that Abdurrahman, the son of Abu Bakr, did offer the food to the guests, but the guests would not eat until Abu Bakr first came in, joined them and ate with them. But we find if your host tells you to eat without eating himself, then there is no problem for you to eat the food. Yes, it's true that most people will feel uncomfortable eating when their host is not eating. But in terms of permissibility, then yes, it is permissible. We find in another narration, Abu Bakr says to his guests, مَا لَكُمْ لَا تَقْبَلُونَ عَنَّا قِرَاكُمْ, what is the matter that you do not accept our hospitality, that is to say our food? And Abu Bakr said to them, فَوَاللَّهِ لَا أَطْعَمُهُ اللَّيْلَ, Wallahi, I will not eat it tonight. But then they went on to say, Wallahi, we will not eat it until you eat it. Now the point here is that Abu Bakr says that he will not eat the food. He takes an oath by Allah. And the reason for this is that he wants to honor his guest. He wants his guest to eat first. And then if there remains anything, he will eat. But of course, as we find, his guests felt uncomfortable and they wanted him to eat it. The question here is, Abu Bakr takes an oath that he will not eat it because he wants his guest to eat, and he's doing that out of honoring the guest. Now if his guests eat, then Abu Bakr eats the remainder, then that is fine. He has not broken the oath. However, if his guests do not eat, then that means they have not fulfilled Abu Bakr's oath, because the oath of Abu Bakr can only be fulfilled if the guests eat. Which means that if the guests do not eat, Abu Bakr has broken the oath. This is a case where somebody else fulfills your oath for you. If you were to say, Wallahi, I will do my homework, then when you do your homework, you fulfilled your oath. And if you do not do your homework, then you have not fulfilled your oath, you have broken it. But you could have instances where you require somebody else to fulfill your oath, such as a person saying to his guest, Wallahi, you will eat the food that I have provided you. If your guest eats it, then he has fulfilled your oath. But if he does not eat it, then you have broken your oath because he did not fulfill it for you. Now Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah says that in a case like this, if you take an oath with the intention of honoring somebody, and then that somebody does not fulfill your oath, such as in this guest example which we have given, then Ibn Taymiyyah says that you do not break your oath and there is no kafara for you. Again, that is to say, if the intention is to honor your guest, or anyone else for that matter. So this is an oath you take to honor somebody. The other opinion on the matter is that if a person takes an oath to honor somebody, or out of fear, or due to any other reason for that matter, which requires somebody else to fulfill the oath for you, and that somebody else does not fulfill the oath for you, then you do have to offer a kafara. They take the evidence from the ayah, لا يؤاخذكم الله باللغو في أيمانكم ولكن يؤاخذكم بما عقدتم الأيمان. That Allah takes you to account for that which you firmly intend in your oath, but He does not take you to account with the types of oath that runs off the tongue without you actually intending it. And then the ayah goes on to mentioning the kafara and what it is. Let's move to the next chapter, the excellence of sharing small amounts of food. From Jabir ibn Abdullah that the Prophet said, طعام الواحد يكفي الاثنين وطعام الاثنين يكفي الأربعة وطعام الأربعة يكفي الثمانية. One person's food would suffice two. Two people's food would suffice four, and four people's food would suffice 8. We can take from this narration that many people gathering around food will give it barakah, because one person's food can suffice 2 people, and the ratio in this hadith is 1 to 2. This can only happen if there is barakah in the food. Otherwise, if you just want to look at it strictly from a mathematical point of view, then one person's food suffices one person. That's why we call it one person's food. So there is an encouragement here to gather around and share the food. Also in Sunan Abi Dawud, authentically we find some of the companions complain that we eat but we are not filled. And the Prophet said, perhaps you eat alone. And they said, yes. And the Prophet told them, اجتمعوا على طعامكم وسموا الله يبارك لكم في طعامكم. Gather around your food, eat together, and mention the name of Allah, and your food will be blessed. The next chapter, about the mu'min eating in one intestine and the kafir eating in 7. From Ibn Umar, the Prophet said, الكافر يأكل في 7 أمعاء والمؤمن يأكل في معن واحد. The kafir eats from 7 intestines and the mu'min eats in 1. This hadith means to tell us that the kafir is avaricious. He just wants to fill his belly. As for the mu'min, we're talking about the true mu'min here. Not merely a person who calls himself Muslim, but actually a mu'min who has iman firmly in his heart. He does not care about filling his belly. He just wants to eat as much to keep him alive. We find, however, many Muslims becoming obese and overeating, and completely ignoring the hadith found in Tirmidhi where the Prophet said, حَسْبَ ابْنِ آدَمَ لُقَيْمَاتٍ يُقِمْنَ صُلْبَهُ فَإِنْ كَانَ لَا مَحَالَةَ فَثُلُثٌ لِطَعَامِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِشَرَابِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِنَفَسِهِ. It is enough for the Ibn Adam, the son of Adam, to eat a few morsels just to straighten his backbone. However, if he has to fill his belly, then let it be 1/3 with food, and 1/3 with drink, and 1/3 for air. Yet we find obesity amongst many Muslims in this day and age. Fallahul Musta'an. This is not the way of the mu'min. Also in the chapter, Abu Hurairah reports that a kafir came to the Prophet as a guest, and the Prophet milked a goat for him, and he drank. And he milked another, and he drank. And so on up till 7 times he milked for him, and the kafir drank. The next morning, that kafir became a Muslim, and the Prophet milked a goat for him, and he drank. Then he milked it a second time, and he did not finish it. And upon this, the Prophet said, الْمُؤْمِنْ يَشْرَبُ فِي مِعٍ وَاحِدٍ وَالْكَافِرْ يَشْرَبُ فِي 7 أَمْعَاءٍ. The mu'min drinks from 1 intestine, and the kafir drinks in 7 intestines. We can take from this narration, in addition to what we have taken before, that you're allowed to invite a kafir in as a guest. Even if you do not hope that he will embrace Islam, you can still entertain a non-Muslim. And this is the general rule, that treating non-Muslims well is allowed as long as they have not fought you on account of your deen, nor driven you out of your homes, as the Quran instructs us. The last chapter of this book, about not finding fault with food. Abu Hurairah narrates that the Prophet never spoke ill of any food. If he liked it, he would eat it. If he did not like it, he simply left it alone. Speaking negatively of a food item can be of 2 types. Firstly, you just give some information about a particular food item. So for example, you may say that a particular item does not taste nice, or maybe it tastes bitter. You're simply giving a declarative statement, declaring something. There is no problem with that, and you're not sinful. The sinful type is the second type, which is when you speak negatively of a food item with a view to insult the food, or make derisive comments about food. So, for example, if food is served to you, but it does not have too much salt, or maybe the toasts are burnt, and you make that comment that, oh look, the toasts are burnt, or perhaps this food does not have too much salt, therefore it does not taste nice. This is fine, you're just giving an information item, you're not speaking these words with a view to insult the food. And the reason for this rule should be clear. The food is a ni'mah from Allah Jalla wa Ala, and any and all ni'mah needs to be thanked. If you personally do not like food, then there could be many others who do like that particular food item.
So there is no benefit in insulting the food. Also, from the hadith of Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr, when the Prophet asked the mushrik for the sheep to either be sold or given as a gift, we may take that you are allowed to accept a gift given by a kafir. Similarly, the Prophet accepted gifts from other kuffar such as Al-Najashi and Muqawqis of Egypt, who gave him Maria, and also Uqaydir gave him a gift as well. All of these were non-Muslims. There is authentically a narration where Iyad ibn Himar radiallahu anh, when he was a mushrik, offered the Prophet a gift, and the Prophet told him, Inna la naqbalu zabad al-mushrikeen. We do not accept the gifts of the mushrikeen. And Allah knows best, but perhaps he did not accept Iyad's gift, so that perhaps then Iyad embraces Islam, and then he would be able to accept his gift, because they had a friendship before the prophethood. We know that Iyad did eventually embrace Islam. He is the one who narrates that hadith. Also, we take the lesson that gathering together around a plate of food brings barakah, such that food which would ordinarily be enough for one would somehow now be enough for two, and this is the effect of barakah. Also, with regards to the mu'min eating in one intestine, Al-Qurtubi rahimahullah says that the mu'min knows what the Sharia requires of him. It is to eat enough so that he can carry on with the ibadah of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Now, you only need to eat a little in order to do this, and that the mu'min fears being taken to account for all the extra things which he ate, which he did not need to eat, even if it was halal. Whereas the kafir does not have this concept of eating in order to worship, and also being asked about the pleasures on Yawm al-Qiyamah. The kafir does not have this concept. So if understood like this, then the Prophet is talking about what ought to be the case, not what is the case. Because you could find that a mu'min overeats and is obese, and this is a deficiency in him. It is not what ought to be the case. Okay, are you allowed to criticize how somebody has cooked the food? The answer is yes, and this is just from nasiha, so that he does not make the mistakes again. But this is not directed to the food per se, rather the criticism is directed to the act of cooking. Okay, let's take some review questions. So question number 1. We find in the narration of Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr, where Abu Bakr was hosting his guests, the wife of Abu Bakr saying, La wa qurrati aini, no, by the delight of my eyes. She's taking an oath by the delight of her eyes. Is this not shirk? Explain the answer. Question 2. Explain a scenario where you take an oath and somebody else has to fulfill it. Otherwise you have to pay the kafara. And then explain this difference of opinion if somebody disobeys you or does not fulfill your oath in honor of you. Question number 3. What does it mean to say that a mu'min eats in one intestine and the kafir in 7?